Okay. Let's see here. Let me go back just one. We're going to go over all 10 of these topics this morning. These are sort of the highlights, the 10 things I think you really need to know about RFPs. I guess amazingly to me, RFP, and that stands for, by the way, the request for proposal. That technique is used worldwide, actually, to encourage competition, and it's amazing that there's not much available in the way of educational material about how to write them and how to perform them effectively. So an awful lot of people find themselves in this situation of trying to buy some complex technology, which is complicated in its own right, and using an RFP process to do that and not really having a good foundation into what all they should be trying to do. So we've developed some training materials around this. I'm going to give you 10 things that I think you really need to know about RFPs. I think you'll find them useful in your own efforts going forward. And we'll give you a chance to learn more about them after the presentation today. So let's go into these 10 things and talk about them. First of all, and I'm on slide 5 now, I want to talk about why vendors hate RFPs. And it's kind of interesting. You would think, as Mike was mentioning earlier, why don't they like RFPs? Don't they want the business and so forth? And, well, yeah, vendors do want the business, but when they get an RFP, especially an unanticipated one, they get rather skeptical that they're on the outside and they're just going to be used, so to speak, to justify somebody else getting this job, someone who is closer to the client who sent out this material and so forth. And so they're very, very skeptical about those kinds of things when they receive them. And that skepticism is a lot greater than their interest in getting the business, really. So, by the way, when they go through this, they're responding to your RFP. They're going to spend a lot of time and money trying to respond and trying to distinguish themselves and their products. They don't want to be just a commodity. They don't want to be viewed that way. They don't especially want to become what we call column fodder. That means they're going to be on your spreadsheet to evaluate the various vendors. They're going to be the columns out there to the right where their bid is going to justify the column 1 vendor, who's the one who is odds-on favorite. So they're going to want immediately, one of the things they're going to want to do is get an audience with whoever's sending out this RFP and find out what's really going on. They may or may not bid. They don't take it too lightly that just because you sent them one that they're going to respond. I've seen plenty of procurements go out to 50 or 100 vendors only to get 2 or 3 responses. So you want to keep that in mind, and I think you really need to pay some attention to being honest with these vendors and being open with them so that they do want to participate, spend their time and effort to give you a bid. Now, vendors, by the way, are going to do, because of this situation, because of the way they tend to look at it, they're going to do all they can to, I call, uneven the playing field. I mean, your RFP in general is going to want to try to make everything the same from vendor to vendor. And believe me, they're going to do everything they can to make that not true. I mean, if everybody's a commodity there, they have no particular advantage. And so they're going to try to go the other way on you. All right? So that's sort of one. You need to realize going into this that vendors hate RFPs and that they're going to do everything they can to find out more and get closer to you, and they're going to try to uneven the field a bit and make their products seem more attractive by doing so. Okay? Well, with that in mind, why would you use an RFP? Well, there's lots of reasons to use an RFP. The first one is that what you are hoping to do generally in sending out an RFP is to encourage competition on this particular procurement that you're trying to make. You want several vendors to bid and really sharpen their pencil and give you a very low price on the technology or services they're trying to provide. and you believe that by doing this and going out to several and collecting bids, you're going to get the best price. Well, I would say that's going to prove to be harder to work out than you think probably going into this. As I said, the vendors are going to try to make themselves as uncomparable as possible. So that's going to be tough. All right. But the RFP still is particularly useful when we're talking about finding a technological solution of some kind where best is hard to define and where a variety of different technical approaches or procedural approaches may be better than others. And in order to find them out, you may need to go to a number of vendors and ask them to do that, to explain their solution to your problem and in their own technology or in their own processes and procedures. Now, and we'll see that that there's a way to draw that out of them and still accomplish several other things. You're also going to want to use this RFP to clearly establish an acceptance criteria. What do I mean by that? Well, in the end, when you've made a complex procurement, let's say you bought a telephone PBX system and several hundred telephones and wiring services and what have you, when it's all done, the vendor comes back one day and says, well, it's all installed and working, and, I'd like to get paid. And you have the task of deciding if you, in fact, got what he proposed in his probably voluminous proposal before you pay him the possibly tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars for his service. So you want to accept some rational process to accept the work. And you want that, you definitely want to do that up front here before the vendor makes his bids so that his bids will reflect that fact that you're going to establish an acceptance criteria. And I'll talk a little bit about how to do that. So you're going to want to use that RFP to find that best solution and to establish that acceptance criteria. And of course, that simultaneously establishes accountability. If you have a well-defined criteria for how you're going to accept the work, then you have a much better chance of holding the vendor accountable for what he's producing. Of course, in a lot of government situations, we also want the paper trail that says that, the procurement was fair and it complied with all the rules and regulations and everyone got a good chance to provide the services. Now, also the sort of last reason for setting up the RFP and using the RFP process is because we want to set a solid foundation for contract agreements and negotiations. Most RFP situations will develop a set of requirements that they send out together with a probably standard, more boilerplate type contract agreement that a company uses, and send those to the vendor to get a bid, and then the vendor sees your contract agreement up front and has an opportunity to react to it and price it into his proposal along the line. So we're going to use this, though. We're going to do two things with the RFP. We're going to incorporate the RFP itself and the responses that came back to it into the agreement. And the RFP itself is going to, of course, acknowledge that the agreement is going to be part of the procurement and make sure that the prices reflect that. So this helps us actually down the line in the actual negotiation, final negotiation of the contract. Okay? So now comes the question, really, and I think this gets overlooked an awful lot. People are kind of enamored with RFP, and they think, okay, we're going to buy something complex or expensive, so we're going to use an RFP. But there's actually two other ways that are interesting and useful, and perhaps more useful in some cases than the RFP itself. One is what we call the RFI. That's, in my experience, usually standing for Request for Information. This